Hello everybody and welcome to week 2. I am open to module 2 and this week you're going to have 2 different modules. So last week you just had the one module, sort of gave you a week to get used to the class and get oriented with all the material, get your books. And so this week is where the course work gets a little heavier, right? So we're a 6-week class, and so roughly each week you're doing 2 chapters worth of material. Last week you had 1 chapter. So this week you have module 2, and then you also will have module 3, as you can see on the side here. So those will both be made available for you, and you'll be using those for this week. Module 2, we're going to be covering chapter 3, stress, the meaning, impact, and sources of stress. And we will also be covering part of chapter 2. So if you recall from the syllabus, chapter 2 breaks down into different modules itself, which pertain to the physiology of the body. So if you take a look at chapter 2 in the Serafino and Smith text, you're going to see that it's comprised of all the various body systems, so the cardiovascular system, the immune system, the endocrine system, and so forth. And rather than covering just the whole chapter all at once all together, we cover those body systems alongside other chapters in which those body systems are talked about most and used. So in terms of chapter 3, we're talking about stress. We're talking about what does it mean, how does it impact people, and what are the various sources of stress. So we cover the body systems of chapter 2, being the nervous system and the endocrine system. Those are the 2 systems that are really affected by stress, and you need to understand how they operate in order to adequately understand how stress operates. So you'll be covering chapter 3, you'll be looking at this topic, and then you'll also be doing the physiological modules from chapter 2, which are module 1, nervous system, and module 2, endocrine system. And as you're reading along in chapter 3, it will actually stop you and tell you, hey, now's a good time to go read about the nervous system. Now's a good time to go read about the endocrine system. So it actually cues you into when you should be reading those. So that's a good tip there for you. And then we'll also be covering chapter 3 in the longevity project. By now you've been acquainted with the termites and what the longevity project is all about, who's being studied, who these subjects were over decades. And now you're going to start diving into different aspects of personality and how it affects health. So this week we're looking at the topic friendly and convivial, and that's healthy or trivial. So looking at sort of sociability, how social are you with other people, and is that a good thing to be social or not a good thing? Specifically, how does that affect you? So let's take a look at the objectives here. And again, these are just guidelines meant to help you work through the material. They're not anything that you're turning in. I did get an email asking about, should we be answering these questions and turning these in? And the answer is no. So you're using this as a guide to what should I know for the nervous system? You should know all of this. What should I know for the endocrine system? Here you go. Okay. And then the same thing for chapter 3. Here's the concepts that are going to be covered in chapter 3. So we're going to be taking a look at stress and what it means exactly, how we appraise our stress. So not all stress is created equal. We have different appraisals of the stress that we face. So we're going to talk about primary and secondary appraisals and how we go about using those when we're faced with stress. You want to be familiar with the different factors that lead to an appraisal of stress. So if you're feeling stressed out by something, what is causing that? What different factors lead to that cognitive appraisal of, I can't handle this, I'm stressed out, okay? And some of that is biochemistry. So we're going to be looking at what's been termed sort of the biochemicals of emotion, what's involved in that when we're feeling something, what's happening at the biochemical level in our body. And then what brain structures are involved with that. Like when signals of stress get sent within the body, where do they go? How do they affect the body? How do the body systems interact with one another, right? So you guys are learning about like the nervous system and the endocrine system, and soon in the next module, the cardiovascular system. And you're going to be seeing how all of those systems communicate and talk to each other. None of them happen in a bubble, right? So when you have neurons that are firing and communicating with one another, they're sending messages, and those messages may go out to your hormones, right? Which are also chemical messengers. They may get sent out to a bodily organ like your heart. They might get sent to your muscles, which may tense up during times of stress. So everything is interconnected and talking with one another. And that's sort of what you're gauging and gaining an understanding of, is just how complex the stress response is. So we'll look also at different categories of stressor, because again, not all stress is created equal. We have stressors that are minute and daily and maybe insignificant, but stressful. And then we have stressors that are huge and life-changing, traumatic even. And so not all of those are essentially the same, and they don't affect our body in the same way. People who suffer PTSD can be the result of traumatic things that happen in one's life, whereas people that face, say, daily traffic jams, this also takes a toll on your body, and it is a stress, but it's not the same as trauma stress. So then we're going to get into a little more detail looking at the body's response to stress using fight or flight response. Some of you have already learned about this in biology. It's physiologically what's happening to the body when we're under stress. We'll also be looking at the general adaptation syndrome, which is basically just a model for understanding what happens as we're going through stress. What about the body is different at the beginning stages of stress versus when stress is over. As you all know, you can go through a stressful period, and it's actually when that stress is done and over that you start getting sick or start getting ill. So we'll look at the different stages of that, and we'll explain how various stressors can produce different physical reactions in the body, like the release of hormones that come to your aid when you're stressed out. This is a good thing, but if you're stressed out all the time and those hormones are being released all the time, then that is going to affect you negatively over time. Those hormones weren't meant to be excreted in great amounts over the course of one's lifetime, but they may help to get you through a stressful period or a tragedy or something where you need to respond quickly. We'll also be looking at how stress affects our cognition, so what we think. So a lot of times our thoughts go hand in hand with how we deal with stress. Looking at how those cognitions affect our stress gives us some power, because if we can change how we think about stress, we can change then how we react to it, and then likely how our body responds. So we'll be looking at that, as well as the various emotions involved in stress and how those trigger stress responses, as well as some differences based on gender, based on culture, in how individuals experience stress and respond to stress. This is where the biopsychosocial model really comes into play, looking at everything about the individual, family context, environment, community variables, and so forth. And then just looking at, lastly, how stress is evaluated and measured. How do we know how much stress is too much stress? Is stress different for different people? How we evaluate it and how we measure it helps understanding then how we can study it. And then lastly, how might stress actually be good for you? So kind of spinning it around and turning it into a positive way of looking at stress. Here are your lecture slides that correspond with Chapter 3 in the Serafino text. The animations link for those physiological modules, again, the nervous system and endocrine system. And then we have a video assignment this week. This is a video called Stress, Portrait of a Killer. It is awesome. I love it. It's such a great current conceptualization of stress and how it affects our body. So I'm going to have you guys watch this video, and you're going to fill out this worksheet when you're ready. So you can watch the video here, you can print out the worksheet, and when you're ready, you submit it via this assignment link here. You're going to click on the link and submit the worksheet there. So you can certainly print out the worksheet and write on it if you want, or you can just type right in. It's a Word document. You can type right into that and save your answers there if you'd like. The videos are all best watched using Chrome or Firefox or Microsoft Edge. Don't use Safari. It does not support a lot of these video links, as you'll find very frustrating. So try one of those other browsers. Your discussion for this module centers around looking at the term and data in the longevity project, and what does it mean to have a sociable personality and be a good communicator? How does that affect your health? And now I see that this window is sort of cutting off. I wonder if I can move it. There we go. So you're going to be taking the assessment, which you've done, I think, in the last chapter. So this is your second time doing an assessment. And there's actually 2 assessments in this chapter. One is for like normal sociability, like how social are you? And one is for emotional sociability. They're not the same. They're a little different. So you're going to take each assessment, you're going to score yourself, and then you're going to answer the questions below. So when you score yourself, this is what you're talking about, right? So the first part of your discussion post is talking about what you got on the scale, what you think about that, what does it mean about you. And then the second part of your discussion post is answering these questions about the chapter. So why did the findings from the Terman study suggest that being selective about who you socialize with is important? Why is that important to be selective in who you socialize with? And how does sociability relate to longevity and health? I don't want you to just give me a one-statement answer. I want you to explain, right? What data do they use to show that there's long-lasting effects to your level of sociability? What were the termites like? So the termites who were more sociable, what did they end up like versus those who were not? Were there differences, right? And discuss the different reactions you might get from somebody when you go out to socialize, but you don't communicate emotionally. So here's where that little caveat is, that being an emotional socializer is a little different from just being social in general. What does it mean? What is that specifically? Okay, so that's your discussion post. Remember that you're responding to these in your original post, and then you're responding to 3 other people. So you want to allow for enough time for everyone to get their responses in. You shouldn't be responding to 3 other people on the 16th because likely everyone hasn't responded yet. So come Friday, Saturday, those are good days to be responding to other people, seeing what they wrote and seeing how you can add to what they said and carry on more of a conversation off of what they said, comment on how they did, what they scored. And remember to integrate and use all the information that you learned about in the chapter. Like some of this stuff applies to what you're talking about in the longevity book as well. So go ahead and integrate that in and show me that you're using what you've learned and you're using all your sources. Again, if you have any questions this week, please feel free to email me as you're going over the slides, the lecture slides, and the readings. If any questions pop up, I'm here, I'm available. Please just let me know, okay? Have a great week, everybody.